Hi, I'm here on Talk Tuesday, and I am really excited to talk to Claire Laurenson from Grief Relief. Claire is a grief practitioner and educator, which sounds like quite a morbid thing to be doing, but we're going to hear Claire's story and understand why she's chosen to do what she does. So I just want to give a big warm welcome and say, hi Claire, thanks for being here.
Marina, Gita, thank you for asking me to be on.
Okay, and a disclaimer here, Claire and I spent a week at a parenting retreat, and so we got to know each other on quite a personal level as well. So I know that the Claire that we see today is not the whole of the Claire that's out there in the world. Okay, so for those people who haven't met you, Claire, and don't know your story, is it okay if we start with Jeremy?
Sure. Yep. Do you have a?
I'll put it in your hands, and I'll let you tell your story.
Okay. So, well, it was the death of my first son that led me down this path to do this work. Ultimately, I didn't know that at the beginning, of course. So Jeremy died 34 years ago. He was 4 months, 12 days, so he was classified as a SIDS death, a sudden infant death syndrome, which means no known cause, basically. And that was the beginning of a 10-year spell in my life of multiple losses of all different kinds. That included my marriage. We'd been living overseas and not only recently returned, all our possessions got lost. Some were on the way back. Had to put our dear old dog down. And that was kind of all within the first year.
Wow.
And then subsequently, my dad died. I had 2 friends that died in different types of accidents. I had another relationship, and I walked away from that ultimately and left my home and my community and started life anew. So that was kind of the 10 years of losses, and then it was a case of rebuilding my life with 3 young children.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of life's lessons, and I guess every time you mention Jeremy, I sort of have to pause and breathe, because it's just unimaginable as a parent to lose a child and to then come back from that, and to be able to do that.
And yet lots of people have to.
Yes.
It's not uncommon.
Yes.
Whatever age it be, whether it's an adult child or a young child.
Yeah.
Yes. The loss is immeasurable as a parent.
Absolutely. And you say that you initially, set up your grief relief to support families who've lost a child. How do we come back from such, devastation? And what does that support look like?
Well, I have to say, before I even got to that place, there was a long period of time where I actually worked for an organisation supporting families after a sudden infant death.
Right.
That was a 12-year journey, and that was really my training ground, responding to families after a death, which was probably the best training ground I could ever have, combined with my own experience. Yes, so it was having done that for 12 years and then going away and doing some other kind of work, and then really missing that work. That felt like that was my vocational work.
Right.
So starting the business was a way of getting back to that work. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I mean, I know that my godfather, who was a vicar once he retired, he spent his whole time doing funerals. And I'd said to him once, and I said, well, isn't that like such a depressing thing to do? And he said, oh, no, it's actually the opposite. I step in and I celebrate people's lives. And
yeah.
And he looked at it like that. And I guess for you, supporting families when they are most at need, in some ways must be just such a gift to be able to give to them.
It's hugely rewarding, it's satisfying, it's enriching, because I know that I can make a difference to their journey by being there at a really crucial time when most of us are at our most vulnerable and our rawest.
Yeah.
And to be able to meet someone in that place and be comfortable with it, know it and be comfortable with it, and to be able to support them through it. It's a real gift. It's a privilege. It's privileged work, yes.
Absolutely, absolutely, and something that I think takes somebody very special to be able to do that. So, so what, I guess there's a couple of questions come up here. If we do have somebody who has lost somebody really close to them, what can we do in order to support them?
Be there. Be there for them, and for the long haul often.
Right.
After a loss, there's usually a lot of people come in and there is a lot of support, and that's great. But it's often, if we're talking about a death, it's after the funeral and everyone goes back to their lives as they were for many of them. But for us, life is, inexplicably changed forever. How do you learn to live with that?
Yeah.
And that's when it really starts to hit home, an incredibly lonely and painful place to be. And that's often when people will reach out for some more support. Yeah.
And so you say be there. What does that look like? What are some practical things that we could do to support somebody who has, suffered a loss?
Practical things. Being a good listener is crucial, I think. This isn't something you can fix for anyone.
No.
It's not a problem to be solved. So being able to sit with grief and be comfortable in it can be hugely comforting for somebody. That they don't have to. So I'm having a wee tear here. Don't have to pretend or put a face on for the world. To be able to just be themselves. And I think the advantage I have is that that stuff's really familiar. That's familiar territory for me.
Right, yes.
Yeah. And so, I don't feel like I'm answering your question here. Let me just refer to some notes here. So it was about how to support. Yeah, okay. So don't assume you know what someone needs or wants.
Right.
We often do things with good intentions and good heart.
Yeah.
But it might not be what's actually wanted or needed.
Right.
So don't assume. Check it out. You might have, it's how can I help you? How can I support you? What do you need? And it may be that they actually don't know. So it might be a case of, would you feel comfortable if I did this? Or would you like, offering some ideas and suggestions? Right. In terms of how you could support them. And I would say work to your strengths, to your own strengths. So if you're not a great listener, then that's not your role. It's great to have a team of people you can call on that fill different needs. Yeah. Often when you're grieving, you're not necessarily strong enough to be able to, facilitate that process. And we just expect that people will know what we want or know. So it's a two-way street. We have to, as a griever, we have to articulate, actually, this is what I want or need. Yeah. And as a supporter, it's, being able to do the same, really. Ask what can I do? What can I do that would be useful? Or there was a lovely story we used to tell for SID's families about, how one woman came. This is quite an old-fashioned story now because people don't polish their shoes.
No, but, I do. Yeah.
One of the real practical things was that someone came in and polished all the family's shoes in preparation for the funeral.
Right.
I mean, such a simple thing.
Yeah.
Yet, it just took a lot of stress off all
Yeah.
the things that need to be done at that time, the
Yeah.
detail stuff. Often as a support person, we want to cook food.
Yes.
And that's lovely, but not a but. I know for me, I couldn't stomach food for a good week. I couldn't eat, you know. So if you're going to bring food, let it be something that at least could go in the freezer.
Yeah.
Or you know, if there's a lot of people, then it's going to serve that purpose of feeding everyone else that's there. But maybe thinking outside the square, different things you could do. So one of the I've just recently working on developing a product for grief that people could give as a gift.
Right.
Which is ways to support someone who's grieving. So some of the components of that is an essential oil, which has been made specifically for comfort and soothing and uplifting. A 28-day journal, so a recording of your process. And that can be helpful for just, you know, like grounding yourself in your day, the really basics, how I'm going to get through today's stuff. Healing stones, and I'm a bit of an alternative around health, so I'm looking at other ways of managing your grief other than going and getting antidepressants or sleeping tablets.
Yeah.
So looking at some homeopathic and naturopathic remedies, medicinal herbs, things you can do for yourself but would also make a lovely gift for someone, which is, you know, it can be empowering because this is stuff you can do for yourself. Back to suggestions. Don't be afraid to ask questions, but it's the right kind of questions.
Right.
So not questions that are invasive, like how do you feel and stuff like that, because often that can be hard to determine because it's such a roller coaster time. But, you know, asking questions that get the person to think about what they need or want. That can be helpful. That's probably, you know, I don't know, I say. A lot of it for me is intuitive, so it's just, you know, it's there in front of me, I know what I need to do and say.
Yes. Okay. And it is intuitive for you, but it's often not intuitive for us, which is, I guess, why I'm asking the question. And of course, people of my age, we're now starting, you know, my friends are losing parents, and, you know, that's something that's, you know, on the radar when you get to my, you know, middle age, that your parents won't be around forever. And you know, when we lose a parent, that's obviously devastating for us, but it can also be really, really challenging for our children because they're losing a grandparent and they have a parent who's grieving. You know, is there anything that we can do to help our children in that situation when they're losing a grandparent and obviously we're losing a parent as well?
So it's a family grief. It's a family loss. So you're not alone with it. You know, there's a unit there that's experiencing that. I would say keep it real. You know, as a parent, if you're grieving, then actually you're modelling this to your children.
Right.
So being mindful of that, you know, and I think being real is important. Keeping life and routines as normal as possible. You know, so that life does carry on. Being honest, but age appropriate in terms of the language that you use. You know, so it's easily understood, and not using ambiguous language. I mean, I don't think most people do this today, but once upon a time they used to refer to, you know, grandma's gone to sleep. Well, what does that do for a child going to sleep? What's the fear in them? So it's just being really mindful of the language that you're using around this loss. I think storybooks have a really good place to play, and it may not even be about the loss of a grandparent, but just about loss in general. I think, you know, reading a story with a child can help facilitate a conversation around
Right.
this.
Yeah.
Yep. And it also gives a child an opportunity, or might open the way for questions or concerns or fears, or, where's grandma now? So those kind of questions I think are really important, because that challenges us as parents to think about, what do I believe about this stuff? I need to know what it is so that at least I can answer my children's questions.
Yeah.
Yes. So I
hadn't thought about that, but asking where grandma's gone is very confronting. But it's something that a child, could well ask and really wants to know. Yeah.
I remember one family who'd lost a child, and the other sibling used to call up his brother on the telephone, on the toy telephone, and have conversations with his brother who'd passed. Yeah, I thought that was really lovely. Everyone has their own beliefs about this stuff. Some people don't have any belief or don't know what they believe about that.
Yeah.
But it's certainly a worthwhile thing to think about.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And that might be dependent on someone's faith, but if you're not practicing any particular faith, then it gets you thinking. And I don't know if it's a good thing to be really definitive about it. I think it's more a good opening for conversation.
Yeah.
And if you don't know, you could ask your child. I'm not sure about that. I'm still, I'm really not sure. What do you think? Kids are wonderful. They're really imaginative, and they already have the answer for themselves. So it's not assuming that they don't, just because they're kids, it's not assuming that they actually don't know. Kids come out with some pretty amazing things sometimes.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Right. And if we are in the midst of grief and we find we're really struggling and we're just not making headway, despite time passing, what would you recommend?
Call me.
Right.
Yeah. If you're feeling stuck and can't get past, then some support, some help. Yeah. Whether it be a counsellor or a minister or someone that you trust, that you feel safe with, to own it, really, to own it.
And so what are the ways that someone else would help us? Because obviously, as you've said, grief's very unique and it's very, it's very dependent on who you are. So how can someone else sort of get us out of that rut and get us moving if we're really drowning in the grief?
Well, I think a profession is probably a place for a professional. Yeah. I don't feel like I can answer the question. It's such a big question. If you put someone in front of me and give me the circumstances, I'd probably be able to respond quite easily.
Right. And so so I guess it is something that is unique to each person, and what you do with the person depends on where they're up to and what's happening. Yeah.
It's it may be a case of what's happened. It's not always a death either. It's loss of any kind. It could be a relationship, and the thing about a death is that we have rituals and processes and acknowledgement, in a public way, like a funeral, which all support us along the way. But often a loss of a relationship or a marriage or a divorce, there isn't that kind of support around. And with it, there are a lot of changes and losses. From my own experience, there was financial loss, there was loss of my home, there was loss of my community, and a whole lot of other stuff besides that I didn't have a lot of external support for. you know. So I'm really mindful of that in our world around the kinds of losses, and there are a lot of invisible losses for some people too. So thinking about, you know, living with chronic illness, which is an area I worked in for several years. You know, a chronic illness, ongoing and relentless, and multiple, you know, on a physical, mental realm, life becomes very small and diminished, and living with that.
You've lost your normal life, and you're having to learn how to live a totally new life, and that's your future. And it's very hard to say, but hang on, I had a really nice life and now my life has changed, and it hasn't changed for the better.
Yeah, so with an illness, it might be, I mean, you have that as well after a death, even. You know, life has changed enormously. But with the health one, it usually is loss of a job, loss of connection out there in the world, loss financially, loss in the community because you're not out there, you know, you're quite isolated in your own home. I was just in awe of the people I worked with that were suffering from chronic illness, the huge emotional and resilience that strength that was required to actually just keep going on a daily basis, not knowing that it would ever get any better. Yeah. I think, you know, for you know, a loss of a person, horrific as it is, there is an opportunity to rebuild your life.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good message, that you did suffer what was, you know, just an indescribable loss, but you've moved on and, you know, and had a fulfilling and, you know, a fulfilling life. And so that death is not necessarily the end of everything. It's just a different way of being.
Yeah, it felt like the end of everything at the time.
Absolutely.
And it's been a long time, and I spent quite a long time, you know, suffering. Yeah, until I got sick of myself suffering, basically. I think, it wasn't, I did a workshop with other parents who'd lost a child. This was about 11 years down the track from my loss. And it was a pivotal time. It was quite key for a couple of reasons. One was that I realised I didn't own suffering. I wasn't the only one who had suffered, you know. Suffered like I. Well, I knew that wasn't true. And it was the first time I actually realised that perhaps I had something to offer back. So that was quite a turning point for me. And that came from being supported, actually. And the growth, the learning and the giving back, and that's all part of my growth, but also part of my healing.
Right.
And I just see that process as a lifelong process, actually. Whatever our loss be, it's not something we can recoup. When we have a loss, it's gone.
Yeah.
So it is learning to live with that and make good from it. Yeah. So the loss doesn't go away, but I've built a bigger life around it. Yeah.
Fascinating.
And I love my life today. It's wonderful. I love my life. Yeah.
Which is so good to hear. Because I guess that is that light at the end of the tunnel, and that is, you know, showing that however awful something is, you know, over time we can move past it.
Yes. Yeah. And many do, and some don't.
Right.
Yeah. I think this is just my view. I think perhaps a lot of mental health issues are grief related, unresolved, undealt with, unsupported. Yep. I think also, you know, family and friends can play that role really well in terms of supporting you. but not always. Doesn't always work that way. But I think it has a huge influence on outcome and rebuilding. Yeah.
Right. So, which is great to know, because if we do have a family member or a friend who, you know, is really suffering, at least knowing that we can make a difference is a really positive thing.
Yes. So one of the ways, I mean, I work in a really wide way. There's no one way that I work, but one of the things I can do is to support someone supporting someone in grief.
Right.
You know, often that is, not often, that has happened, you know, when I was doing the SIDS work, that, you know, after a sudden death, there was just, you know, a whole lot of people would come in, family, friends, but agencies and all sorts, that actually they didn't need someone else walking through the door, but there was already somebody in place there to support, but needed some guidance on how best to do that.
Yeah.
You know, I can support to support. Yeah. Yeah.
Super.
It doesn't have to be, you know, directly. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that's really good to know, because, you know, I had a friend who lost a sister, and really didn't have the understanding of how to support her. And should I have known, a quick phone call to you would have been amazing, so that, you know, I did understand, I guess, a better way for me to be able to step in and support her, and know that I was doing the right thing.
Yes, and it's supporting the person doing the supporting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Support is a really broad word, but actually I think it's a very apt word for what I do. Yeah, because there's lots of multiple ways of doing that.
Yeah.
So, you know, so I do phone support. So it doesn't even need to be face-to-face. I've done a lot of phone support in the past for around sudden infant death and parenting. Cancer stuff was mostly face-to-face stuff. I prefer face-to-face, but I actually quite enjoy phone support as well.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. Where am I going? Don't know where I'm going with that. But
well, what I'll do, Claire, is I'm going to I'll upload this to the Facebook page and up onto the YouTube channel, and I'll put your details on there, so that if somebody does feel that they need a bit of extra support, either as a supporter supporting somebody, or, you know, somebody who's dealing with grief and wants some extra support, then they can get in contact with you. And it's been lovely to talk to you today, and thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, and thank you for being somebody who works in an area that is just such a, you know, it's such a challenging thing for a lot of us to think about and to comprehend.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you, Judith. Appreciate it.
Okay, fabulous. Well, you have a great day, Claire, and it's been lovely to talk to you.
Thanks, Judith.
Okay,
bye.
Bye.